Hello, everyone. I'm Gustavo Loyola, manager of I5 program, and I would like to welcome you to the session Humanizing Business Education. I would like to start bringing a panorama for the next 4 or 5 minutes discussion. As we know, our world is hungry for business education that engages today's leaders and prepares tomorrow leaders to create a world that works 100% of humanity. As we have been observing in our discussions earlier today, there's a growing recognition among business schools faculty for the need to leverage each other's insight to teach differently. Business school professors have the opportunity to not just impart knowledge to students, but to engage students in practical applications of that knowledge and to alter their mindsets and perceptions of the world. To discuss with a really interesting view with this, I invite Michael Pirson, member of UN Prime Working Group on Humanistic Management, area chair and professor at Gabelli School of Business at Fordham University. Welcome, Michael. And also Brian Wellinghoff, Director of Strategy, Improvement and Culture for Barry Wellinghoff. Welcome, Brian. It's a pleasure to have you here. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be sharing the stage with Brian here and a privilege. So we have prepared a couple of slides, and I think we're also eager to answer all of the potential questions that you have.
Yeah, Michael, if I can just add to that, please be active in the chat. We'll look to align this presentation to what you're looking for. It's truly an honor. I hope what you'll find in our discussion today is a synergy of viewpoint between the opportunities for academia and industry to work together. And so I will brag on Michael for just a second. Michael is a tremendous academic. He is a tremendous professor in the classroom. I have seen it firsthand, but even more so, he's a connector of people around these ideas. As you heard, he's part of the UN Prime Working Group that he'll talk a little bit more about later. But if there's nothing else that people take away from this conversation, it's that we can do more together. There are so many people doing wonderful things in their schools, in their regions, in their networks. And we're part of an initiative to help draw networks of networks together, and just concluded a 2-day meeting yesterday that we'll share more about. My background is from a manufacturing company. And so we are in industry, but we are known for developing our truly human culture. And that's where Michael and I align so deeply, is that whether it's in the classroom, it's through practice of projects from the classroom that take you outside into industry, or how the classroom bleeds into industry. There are so many opportunities to share this along the way. Michael, would you like to share just a little bit more about yourself and what you do with Fordham and UN Prime?
Yeah, sure. Very briefly, and then I want to shower praise on you. So yeah, I came to the profession of being a business school professor just looking at how can we create a world that works for everybody. Buckminster Fuller was, I think, had this idea of creating a world that works for 100% of humanity. And when I heard that, I think that sounds so interesting as a question, as a research question, as a teaching platform and everything. And when I was in business school, I think that was lost on me. That didn't come through. That wasn't even close to an ambition. It was sort of like, how does the world work for me? How can I get ahead? And the same thing, not only in the business world, but in academia very similarly. So that left me a little bit impoverished, uninspired, and diminished as a human being, I'll say. And now when I then came across these ideas of honoring universal principles of human dignity, like the UN has enshrined, and the journey towards mutual flourishing, that seems to be such a different narrative, such a different inquiry, but it was one that was inspiring me all the time. And every time I'm in that inquiry with people like Brian and others, it is engaging, it's enlivening, it's empowering, and it's sourcing. And what I see as one of the tragedies in current business education is that we're cutting off those lifelines, those sources of energy. And we can do better, and we know that we can. And so that's why it's so exciting to be here with Brian, be here with everybody at the UN Prime Summit. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to connecting more. And that's what I'm out to cause and create and contribute to, is that we create a world that works for all by transforming business education. And if I may, Brian, you could not find a better partner than him. It was sort of serendipity and however higher powers will that we connect, and that Bob Chapman, his CEO, is on a mission of transforming business and transforming organization and transforming education and business education along the way. So in that context, we're here together to speak to you, and really you should meet Brian, you should connect with him. You should have the privilege of connecting with fantastic people across all kinds of walks of life that share a common vision in creating this world that works for everybody. So with that,
we want to share that vision with you today, but we want to start with how we perceive the state of the world. And something that was reinforced yesterday through more than 40 different academics gathered together, I know we have many on the call today, was that the why is rarely in doubt anymore. We see these similar challenges in our world today. It's the how that will get us to us. We want to begin with the why, but build to the how. And Michael, you've described this so well. What are this current situation that you see in the world today?
Yeah, and I think this is not new to anybody here on the call, but we have these manifold challenges that really become this perfect storm that's been described for about 20 years that we could see if we opened our eyes. And it's kind of scary because we don't really know how to deal with it. And the good news is that as human beings, we have survived so far. So there is some kind of potential that we can, using our brain and other facilities, address them. But it's important that we are aware of inequality, the environmental damages, the technological development that could be empowering, could be threatening, the manifest problems in society around hunger persisting, around corruption, around anti-democratic values, around mistrust in business and in other institutions that really get us into a state of separation rather than collaboration.
And these are complex challenges. And what Barry Wehmiller has seen from a different lens, but a complementary lens, is some of what's actually happening in our businesses today. And this is what our CEO, Bob Chapman, talks about a lot. You see on the left, different research has shown that 3 out of 4 people in businesses today are disengaged from what they do. 7 out of 8 people believe that they work for a company that does not care for them. How are we honoring human dignity if only 1 out of 8 people believes that they work for a company, an organization that cares for them? And this isn't just esoteric. We know that stress is a leading driver of health or ill health, and that 74% of stress often comes from things we experience in the workplace, whether that's lack of dignity or lack of respect, not seeing the contribution that we can make in the world, how our efforts align to a greater good, not having a vision or mission along the way. And 2 items that might bring that home for you that we speak about a lot is that, at least these are US facts now, in the United States, there's a 20% increase in heart attacks on Mondays, because that's when people are returning to work and returning to the stressful environment. And we love the insight from the book Dying for a Paycheck from Jeffrey Pfeffer, that excess deaths from workplace stress can number as much as 120,000 per year. So there is environmental degradation. There are technological challenges and complexities. And there's also just the way that we treat people in our organizations each and every day that can drive things to be different. And what we believe in Barry Wehmiller is that if we can alter our mindset and develop some skills, we can treat everyone we come in contact with as someone's precious child, as someone with innate human dignity. And that's why Michael and I have collaborated together and with others around a common vision moving forward, based on a couple of mindsets. And Michael, you elaborate these mindsets so well. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so part of what we're training ourselves is the communication around what is the model that we're living with, that we're experiencing, that is quote unquote broken or that we can transcend. And many of you probably here are familiar with Donut Economics by Kate Raworth and others, and even the symbol of the SDGs is presented in a ring. Right. And that's what I call maybe the humanistic model or the bagel model, in which dignity, the core human property of inherent value, is protected at a minimum, where social minima are fulfilled, so that we can start living a human or a decent life. And then clearly there are outside conditions within the planetary boundaries that give some context around what is the safe and just zone, the optimal zone that Kate Raworth describes for human flourishing. So there is a possible bandwidth in which we can all flourish. What does that look like? That's the question that we're exploring within what we call a humanistic model. And that's very, very different from the dominant model that we describe as economistic, where the responsibility of ourselves, of managers, of stewards of society is basically maximization. And that's not a bad thing. That has helped us in the past to clarify what we're about to. And it has a couple of assumptions, as we all know, that maximization of personal wealth, maximization of profit at the level of the organization or GDP is linked to happiness and well-being. And what we see is that that is not the case, even though we have very powerful narratives behind that around who we are as human beings. And the cartoon character of Scrooge McDuck is just one descriptor. And we all know Homoeconomics, and we all agree here that it's bad, it's poor theory, et cetera, et cetera. It's still there. It's still dominant unless we actually not only complain about it, which makes it stronger, but replace it. And we can replace it with Homo sapiens. We do have the scientific insights to do so. It's interesting how much we resist it. And that allows certain disciplines and certain paradigms to stay in power. So within the humanistic story, within the humanistic perspective, we're drawing a lot on evolutionary biology, anthropology, even quantum physics to some degree, in terms of allowing us to understand the nature of reality in which human beings have developed, have survived so far. And it means that basically we are different from our core assumption set. And because we're so different from the core assumption set that guide us, we're in trouble. Because if we were Homo economicus, we would be thriving.
That's so profound, Michael. And I want to acknowledge we did get our first question along the way. It was how to teach resilience, empathy, compassion throughout students' academic careers. If you'll hang with us for just a few moments, that's what we're building to, some models and ways of actually translating that into practical applications in our world. Both Michael and I have experience in that, and we'll build to it in just a little bit. We want to set that mindset for you along the way. Michael's done a phenomenal job of describing a couple of those items. Two mindsets that we bring from Barry Wehmiller. This is a reference from Thomas Friedman, the New York Times columnist. What I really focus you on here is it's about respect. It's about dignity, the amazing power we have when we treat people as humans, and specifically the aspect of listening that is so deeply embedded in that. And so if I were to offer from my perspective to that question, what is at the foundation of resilience, empathy, compassion, so many great humanistic capabilities? We believe listening is one of the core elements that are there. And the Barry Wehmiller organization's actually started a foundation to teach our listening course in a variety of different modes and places in society, because we know that's inherent there. And we are not the only ones. So many of you on this call are probably, yes, you're teaching aspects of listening and how to come to that, but it's a foundational skill and opportunity that we have to move things forward, because we operate from this mindset that organizations, businesses, and nonprofit organizations are the ones that can be the most powerful force for good in our world today. I echo Michael. There are so many challenges in our world today. Famine and hunger and climate change and war and so many other things. But we want to focus on what can be done for the good, and that our organizations can be a huge source of good in the world if our leaders will embrace the responsibility of true leadership for them. If our leaders will do it, and as we are developing future leaders for tomorrow, if we embed fundamentally in that education that their responsibility is to be a force for good in the world, and that begins with treating people exceptionally well. And so this is what has aligned Michael and I and others and where we are. And so we want to explore 3 questions with you today, and keep adding your questions in along the way. Well, the first is, what are some new possibilities? What are possibilities that are created when business school students can become leaders who are competent, courageous, caring, and creating positive change? And what we feel we need, as Michael alluded to, is to replace that current Homo economicus narrative with a new vision and a new narrative. And Michael, would you introduce the narrative that we have to the organization here?
Right. And as I described before, I think that we all have a deep yearning to create a world that works for all of us. The more we have connections with others, the more we want them to do well. The more we are connected at the level of our species with technology is increasingly the case. We want all of them to do well. There is nothing more painful than reading the news in the morning where you read about basically people not doing well. And it's painful. That's why many people tune out. And because why do they tune out? I'll say for myself and many students that I asked, it's like we don't feel that we can do much about it. It's beyond our competency to do something about it, even though we care. And we do deeply care. If we know one thing from evolutionary biology is that we, with the mirror neurons that we have, whatever we see, we start caring because we take it on as our own. And then it's a training almost to sort of desensitize ourselves. We need to create narratives telling us that we shouldn't care, that we don't need to care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to transcend that and transform business education to foster humanistic leaders that honor human dignity, themselves, basically, their own humanity, and demonstrate the courage to care for others and honor their dignity and work towards shared well-being on a healthy planet. And with that, we have created a number of specific statements what that could look like. So, Brian.
And just yesterday, we began embracing this image of the ripple in a pond. And we're obviously not the first ones to utilize that image. But the invitation we're going to give to each of you today is to be an ambassador of these ideas in your spheres of influence. That's how we concluded our meeting yesterday, is that all of us already are the stone in the pond of so many of our students' lives, our organizations' lives. But we have the opportunity to continue to be ambassadors of this thought, and not just from this session, but from all the sessions you're attending as part of the UN Prime Global Forum. Please be an ambassador of these ideas. Ripple out, tell additional people, take whatever action you can take in your spheres of influence. We want to encourage you, if that's aligned to some of the things that Michael and I are sharing today, that's wonderful. We're going to share our contact information with you at the end of our time. Or if it's from some of the other sessions you're taking, please be an ambassador of this idea to more people in the world, because the world greatly needs it. Michael was alluding to these 4 primary areas. I'll speak to the first 2 and invite Michael to speak to the second 2. The first is what we've been sharing with you. It's aligned to the whole purpose of this global forum, is to transform business education, our current business model and learning experiences, to something that allows people to be fully human, fully themselves, fully alive in their classes. And we know from conversations that this is happening in places, in pockets throughout the world today, but we want it to become commonplace. We want it to become the standard, the norm, that business education creates places where we can be fully human, enlightened, enlivened, and empowered, where student leaders are competent, courageous, caring, and creating positive change. I want to highlight 2 elements there. One is that they're creating positive change during their educational experience. Our students, undergrad, graduate of different ages and programs, can create change in the world right now with the skills and capabilities that they have. And we are forming them for tomorrow to be the leaders of tomorrow, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, to continue to transform our world. And that's the second item, humanistic leaders that recognize and nurturing connections to self, to others, to nature, and something or someone bigger than ourselves, from whatever tradition, background, or beliefs that we come from, and developing others to connect as well. I can say personally, the most powerful professors I've had were subject matter experts in what they did, but they were also someone who showed up with a different way of being, with a different sense of presence, and truly impacted not just my knowledge, but my life. And that's the first 2 elements. Michael, you want to speak to the second 2?
Yeah, so as we mentioned before, the notion of human dignity, even though it is enshrined in the UN agenda, and it's the foundation of it, I think it's very much out of place in current dominant narratives of organizing, managing world affairs and also business affairs specifically. So we want to remind ourselves of this highest sort of common human agreement, that we're committed to human dignity, to the freedom and the model of success that create a world in which we all prosper and flourish. All is sort of a key word. Some we have right now. And you would imagine that even those some that are very wealthy, et cetera, are actually not flourishing. They're scared. And that organizations in that context serve humanity when they recognize our dignity and interconnectedness. we can talk about stakeholders. But ultimately, what I want to throw out there is that we are all human beings, ultimately. And so that recognition that we're all human beings, transcending that notion of stakeholders, customers, employees, whoever. So that's one of the core elements. And that leads, if you see it, to a greater commitment that must be shared well-being on a healthy planet, because without that, none of us can thrive. And so in that context, education needs to equip us not only with these nice words or an ESG kind of training, but really truly the way that we can promote healthy ecosystems, the flourishing of all life, and that we create organizations that are aligned with that, with our inner world, our inner desires, our humanity and dignity, and that without the systems, societal systems, so that we create both a world that works for everyone in the pathway of it.
And so these two slides represent what we call the manifesto of this thinking that we've been meeting for the last 2 days around, we believe is fully connected to the UN Prime Initiative, to initiatives of many other organizations around the world. And just we seek to identify and connect like-minded people in these spaces. And so the question I offered at the start of this section was, what possibilities are created when business school students become leaders who are competent, courageous, caring, and creating positive change? That's a question I'd offer for you all to think about. And maybe Michael and I can give a little glimmer, but I think the possibilities are almost endless when we tap into the true humanity and potential of the business school students in our midst. And what we have seen is the capability of people to help others through trauma, through struggle, to a beauty and confidence that carry them throughout the whole balance of their career. And I want to say, as someone who is not a formal business school professor, but is a more corporate educator, there's a special time when people set aside to go through a business educational experience. Is a special time for growth, a special opportunity that those of you who are in that space are making impacts that last a lifetime. And that's what we have the opportunity to form those who are impacted for their lives and therefore impact others through their lives. Michael, I wasn't sure if you wanted to share maybe a specific example or something that comes to mind of what you see as the possibility when we do show up in a classroom and engage students in this type of humanizing education.
Yeah, I think we probably had this experience. Many of us had these experiences where people, students, move from desperation, quiet or not so quiet desperation, to hope, to empowerment, to desire to contribute, to transforming their own personal being into really harnessing their own power, the power of the alignment that can occur when we resonate at our level with those around us, with the higher levels of the organization and the planet, to really create harmony and synchronicity and action, important action. This can't be just sort of la la land somewhere off on a cushion under a banyan tree. This is when you see people really truly being empowered and alive, dealing with all the breakdowns and creating resiliency. I think this was the question: resilience, empathy, compassion for themselves and for others. That is what it means to be alive, that we're failing, that we're creating, that we are inspired, and that we are co-creating with others, that we're not alone. So once you tap that, and once you see students tap into that, there is hope, there is joy, there is desire, there is a willingness to live that goes beyond, oh, let's just party. I had students that were saying, I was a nihilist. I believed in all of those things before I started college, and we're at a Jesuit school. You would think that a Jesuit school would nourish this, but no, the students are very clear, this is not nourished. It was beaten out of me in 4 years. And when they reconnect, you see that sense of aliveness, of empowerment. And that's the possibility that I see, that we're all in the process of enlivening ourselves and contributing.
And I'm going to move us to the next possibility. As Michael brought back that question, we're going to get to the answer here. Our second possibility is, if only 1 in 8 people feel they work for an organization that actually cares for them, whether that's a business, whether that's an educational institution, a university, a nonprofit. How can business educators help to inverse that relationship? I mean, just think for a moment, stop for a moment. What would be different in our world if rather than 1 out of 8 people feeling they worked for an organization that cared for them, what if 7 out of 8 people felt they worked for an organization that cared for them? And our ultimate vision is to have 8 out of 8 people be able to say that. And this is where I really need to compliment Michael. He's been one of the lead collaborators in a conversation around this framework of being, knowing, and doing. And what's fabulous is it's the same framework that Barry Wehmiller utilized 15 years ago to start our own internal university. It resonates in a variety of different capacities. And Michael, I wonder if you'd share just the high level of that area, because it begins to speak to how do we teach resilience, empathy, compassion. Well, there might be details in those different areas, but they all involved an element of knowing, of doing, and of being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure that many of you on the call are aware of this model, and we've been talking about this over time. And clearly, knowing is what we have focused on. That's what the point of the university was many years ago, and it was the hope that through our knowing we develop our being. And there's a true pedagogical perspective behind that actually does work. It does develop our being, and it informs our doing. At this point, I think we can all probably agree that the knowing that we're transmitting is creating a way of being that doesn't really work in this world, in the context of what Brian was saying, the organizational impacts that we're creating and the personal impacts that we're experiencing. And so how can we shift that? We can shift the knowing, and we can potentially influence the doing in different ways by working with companies that are more enlightened, like Barry Wehmiller, by the way, a $3 billion manufacturing company. So it's not a lightweight. It's not like something out there. It's actually proven to work and work effectively. At the same time, the networks that we work with, including the Jesuit Business School Network, looking newly at what that means to engage with the being. What does it mean to be a leader and develop and transform educational experiences around the being that inform the knowing and that inform the doing? It's not an either or. It's like, how do we reroute that so that we can be professors, that we can be teachers, that we can be guides to create a world that works for everyone, for ourselves and for the students? Because if we're not credibly living it, it will be ineffective in terms of how we teach it.
And to get a little bit specific from the Barry Wehmiller example, I mentioned our listening class before, again, to address the specific question on empathy and compassion. This is how we look at designing not just the formal curriculum, but the experience that we walk people through to make sure when we talk about listening, there's knowing, there's doing, and there's being. We have a 5-step listening model. There are lots of great listening models out there, but the knowing, to know that there are multiple steps that are critical to being a good listener. The doing, to have actual practice in the classroom. Again, these things are not revolutionary, but dyads, triads, small groups to actually practice that skill. And then assignments after the session to go home and practice that with someone significant in your life, a friend, a partner, a parent, whomever that might be. And in the being element, really drawing out 3 key things. 1, forming the professor or facilitator who is showing up so that they are showing up modeling listening. The second is making space for reflection so that as people practice, they can reflect and inform their being. And then finally, the opportunity to simply engage with others' humanity and experience that sense of being, that sense of deep listening in a classroom. And so I see another question. How did you find each other? Michael, do you want to speak to that one briefly? Because I think what's behind that question, I believe, will be, how do we continue to find each other? And Michael and I want to be part of being a network of networks creator across so many different groups. Mm-hmm. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the invitation that we have also to everybody that's listening, is like, how do we find each other and how do we co-create together? Mm-hmm. We can find each other, but then that's like a one-time thing, maybe a good conversation. What I think we're intending on, that's why we keep finding each other, Brian. It's like there's this shared desire, and there's this complementary competence around how we can create this vision together. And just for, I think, historical accounts, the common connector was Donna Hicks. You might know of her. She works on dignity and international conflicts. And she and I and the working group that we have at the UN have been doing quite a bit of work already. And then I think there was this editorial by Tom Friedman in the Times that then got Bob Chapman, your boss, right, connected to me and Donna, and then we started those conversations, and we had conversations ongoing about transforming Jesuit business education and along those lines. And so Bob was really taken by that vision of the possibility of spreading the message that they have shared for themselves. You might know about a book called Everybody Matters that Bob Chapman and Raj Sisodia co-authored. And so that message very much aligns and resonated with what we were doing in the Humanistic Management Working Group and with other partners like Ashoka, like the Jesuit University Network, and beyond. And so that's how we keep finding each other. That's how we're able to work together and enjoy each other's company and just see how this energy can actually be multiplied. And we invite you all to participate and co-create if that is resonating with you.
And I'll just build on that briefly. Yes, that's our invitation to you. If you feel somewhat alone in the world, that you're unique in your department or your school or your region, and you're looking for other like-minded people, reach out to us after this session and we'll connect, whether it's with us or with others. There is so much generosity in this space of connection and support because we all have that similar vision and we're all committed to it. If you're already part of great groups, we'd love for you to reach out and collaborate with the UN, with us, with others, so we get network of networks going together. We continue to find more people who are doing great things. And if we can leverage that together, we will shorten the amount of time it takes to fulfill on our vision of creating a world that works for 100% of humanity. And so you see on the screen now, our final question for today's session is, how can we invite students to be a part of creating that shared well-being on a healthy planet? And one of the initiatives that's come out of our collaboration, and not just the two of us, we stand here before you on behalf of so many others that are critical to these ideas, is we are launching something we call the Academy of Humanistic Leadership. This is a collaboration across multiple different groups and areas because there's a growing recognition amongst business school faculty that there's a need to leverage each other's insights. And so back to the question that was asked, how do we find each other? Well, reach out and realize we can leverage each other's website or insights because we have everything that we need in the collective wisdom of faculty around the world and students and others, of course, to make a difference. And so this idea of an Academy of Humanistic Leadership, we're looking at three things to start. And this is an evolving idea, and we invite you to be part of that evolving idea. The first is cohort programs for development. And we just launched one 2 days ago, a cohort of a few professors who are like-minded, who are going to support and challenge and develop each other in knowing, doing, but especially in being and how they show up in the classroom. We're beginning to share some standalone sessions, some Barry Wehmiller content, some Michael Pirson content, some content from others that allows people to tap in and get a little inspiration along the way. We had 2 sessions in May, and we'll have more coming up soon. And we're just building our first certificate program. Fordham is a sponsor organization for some MBA students, but we hope to build that out to graduate and undergraduate programs. But first, something for MBA students, a 6-session opportunity for people in January to connect to this idea. Because as we found that professors are hungry for it, we know that students are yearning for this. That's the beauty, is with everyone that we talk to, yes, there are challenges in the world. The beauty is our students are asking for the opportunity to meet those challenges along the way. And so I see another comment here. Not all faculty administrators are involved in business education, believe or understand this importance, or even if they do, they don't take effective action. How do we transmit, convince, encourage people along the way? If it's all right, Michael, I'm going to take us to one more slide and then ask you to share with that. This is something that Michael and I both believe, and we would invite you to this. Be brave, be bold, be human, and be together. And so be brave. It does take courage. If you are feeling alone or in a place that doesn't have as much support, be bold. We believe that the needs of the world require boldness. To be human, I will offer to you, it has required more of my humanity over the last year of knowing Michael Pirson than almost any other time, but it's been so beautiful because I'm not perfect, but I do have some gifts to offer. And then finally, be together. I hope if you take something away from today, whether it's connecting with us, others in the UN Prime network, or others closer to you, we are stronger when we do this together. Michael, would you want to share more in response to that question? How do we transmit, convince, and encourage people?
So maybe I can tell you what we're standing in here as a future fulfilled, quote unquote, 2025. We have transformed business education by really developing at least 5,000 professors across the globe to be credibly competent in sharing and transmitting those competencies of care, concern, and creating a world that works for everybody through their domain and inspiring further other people. That will happen in concert with ranking institutions, with assessment institutions, and with the Academy of Management, for example, with the UN Prime, with all of these organizations that already exist, like business partners, like Conscious Capitalism and others, and that are yearning for those graduates, that are yearning for those professors to work with, that actually can support them in better research and all of those things. Now, there are lots of concerns in the space, and if I hear correctly, the concern is that not everybody is on board. For sure, never will everybody be on board at the beginning of a journey. Not that this is a beginning. I think there are so many people, and we probably all know that intuitively, there are enough people. And there is this principle, I think it's called pluralistic ignorance, that we trap ourselves in, that we think we're the only one. And once we step out of that, and what Brian was saying, like be bold and together, then you see, wow, it's so possible to live that and create that space. And what we're inviting you to is that, yeah, you can work with us. We have other cohorts coming up. I know many of you have your own networks, do very similar work. So we encourage you just to share that, and through the UN Prime platform and beyond, to see how we can scale it up. How can we scale it up? That's really the central challenge. So I leave it at that.
I asked the IT team to just put our final slide up there with contact information. We would love it if you reach out, if you check, you see 2 websites down there at the bottom. And even you just take something away from today that you inspire others in your own network. This is something that we can do together. And so, Sophie, if you want to take down that slide again, hopefully if people wanted to take a screenshot or write that down, they could. Another comment that was made is there's a financial benefit to this. Yes, there is. We believe it's important to do it for the right reason. The right reason is beginning with human dignity. But at Barry Wehmiller, we talk about people and performance being in harmony. Organizations that focus on people, on culture, on customers, on the right ways of doing things in the world are over the long term more successful than other organizations. Raj Sisodia's research in firms of endearment. I mean, there's multiple different studies. I don't think this is in dispute anymore. And yet it still is not necessarily common practice around our world. So through research, through academia, through showing up with our humanity, we have the chance to change the world and have more successful businesses and organizations along the way.
And more joy, right? This is just like in so many ways, a better life where flourishing can occur. And that's basically all.
Yeah, so I think you get the sense that Michael and I could probably talk for the balance of the day on these topics. I hope that you take away our enthusiasm, our own humanity, who are building this with others, and we just hope that it's an invitation today to continue to share your humanity in whatever spheres you find yourselves in. We're so glad you're a part of the UN Prime Global Forum. You're a part of this initiative, and you are always welcome in any of the ways that we will continue to collaborate with UN Prime and others to forward this conversation around the globe. And so we thank you for the time today and your attention. Michael, as always, thank you for your collaboration, the work that we do. I'll give you the final word today, maybe the final action a little bit.
Yeah, let's raise the temperature. Let's raise the roof. I think that's really just all I have to say is like that this is the time to do it. This is the time to engage with it. The doubts are potentially, there's evidence for doubts. I think that time is over. Let's just be bold, be human, and be together in that context. So thank you all for this opportunity. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, Brian. Thank you to Mette. Thank you to everybody here. So take good care.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your conference and be human in all the interactions that you have today. Thank